Well, hello. You can tell the season is starting to change. We're getting into mid-fall when the weather makes everything start to go dormant. So that means things along my perennial bed. Now, when it comes to trimming, everyone always wants to know, how do I prepare my beds for fall? How do I get them ready for winter? Do I cut everything off? Do I trim my shrubs again? What do I do? Honestly, when it comes to fall, any yard work is always less is more. There's not too many things that should be trimmed. I do not trim my boxwood anymore because we're getting close to the cold months. And if you trim things like boxwood now in late fall, it's gonna spur growth, which may not harden off in time, and then you get winter burn. So instead what I'm gonna do are things that are looking not so good. This peony obviously has seen better days. It got a lot of powdery mildew. So in the last few weeks, we've been really dry, we've been kind of warm, not good air movement, and that has caused powdery mildew. So when something has powdery mildew that bad, one, it looks ugly, but it's not soaking in any energy from the sun. It's really not doing any good. So I'm gonna cut down my peonies. I have both herbaceous peonies and Ito peonies I'm gonna cut down. Ito peonies, I have other videos on this, but Ito are a cross between a tree peony and an herbaceous peony. The only peony I don't cut down in the fall is a tree peony. They are not pruned like other ones. They don't come from the ground up. So I'm gonna start trimming these off to clean up this bed and then kind of talk about some other things that I don't trim. For the peonies that I cut off, I've been coming down the line cutting them off. You can tell, they look pretty gross, they look pretty worn, they're not doing anything good for the garden anymore, which this time of year, everything is going dormant and it's starting to die back. So what I do with these is I cut them all the way down here at the base, because next year, they're gonna come up from the ground and we don't need any of this old growth. You can, of course, if you want to, you could leave them on over the winter, but when it starts looking so ugly, I think hydrangeas can look pretty during the winter to have those flower heads on. But when you're starting to get so many brown spotty leaves that aren't looking good and they have powdery mildew on them, it just to me seems like it's time to get rid of them and throw them out. So I'm cutting them off at the base, they'll come up from the ground, and it kind of then gives me time to kind of assess the area, maybe see weeds I've been missing with all the overgrowth, because that is easy to do. And you can cut off things like your garden phlox. They a lot of times this time of year too. So anything that has blooms, I'm gonna leave going. So I have some calamint down the row. Pollinators are still loving it. It is still blooming. And so anytime it's over 50 degrees, usually pollinators are active and they're looking for food, they're looking for sources for that. So if you have blooms, you wanna keep them on this time of year because there is still plenty of action happening and insects that need the food. To finish up in this bed, I just cut down any of the lilies I had growing throughout the year. So these could have been cut down a few months ago, and obviously I didn't get to it with all the growth that was in front of them. So when something is completely brown, there's no life in it. It's not doing you any good having it in the garden. So it's easy for it to come down now. You could wait till spring, but it'll probably break over the winter. So for this bed, that's mostly what I do. Now, not everything has died back yet and gone dormant. So we'll have some more of this in the next month completely die back, look dry, look dead, and I'll probably leave the rest of it. I'm gonna go over to one of my other beds and show you why I leave it. So this is a perennial bed I put in probably about 5 years ago. It has some structure with some arborvitae flanking it, some boxwood on the corners, and then it has lots of my favorite perennial allium that bloom in the summer. It has some hydrangeas in front, and then of course some meadow sage kind of mixed throughout. Now the sage is still, or the salvia is still blooming, and so pollinators are still coming up onto it. The allium, the heads have kind of dried off, but there's still a lot of green in it. All of this I leave. I leave it all winter long, like I said. Some of it is habitat for different insects and different wildlife maybe that want to live within it. A lot of it though just also adds some winter interest. You know, I live in a really open area where it can look really desolate, flat, and just lifeless in the winter. So when you have some things that pop up in the garden like this, catch the snow in different ways, have dried seed heads that maybe certain birds could even eat on, it's nice to leave it and just clean it up in the spring. In the spring, all this green growth is gonna die back to the ground that I can just come in and literally just pull it with my hand. So I will do all that. I'm not gonna, of course, trim my boxwood anymore. It's getting too late in the year for that. And I'm gonna let all this go. As the season changes, a lot can change in the garden, but thankfully when it comes to fall, we don't have near as much that we need to do. It's better to kind of let it run its course, let nature do its thing, and leave everything till spring, other than some of the items that can be taken out now. And then you just are having an easier time in the fall, and that's what's great. So I have more work to do. I need to start taking all my plants in, my succulents, get them in for winter storage. Just remember, you don't have to get out and try to winterize your whole garden. Let it do its thing, and it will love you for it.